You're listening to The Extraction, conversations on the systems and strategies behind dental practice growth with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Hey everyone, welcome to the Extraction Podcast. Your co-host Kyle here along with my co-host and the co-founder CEO of Team Care, Colin Ambler. And today we are joined by Jordan Blackman from Tower Leadership. In this episode, we talk about how Jordan got into dentistry, why Tower Leadership has built a reputation as the Rolls-Royce of dental consulting, and the one move dentists should make this quarter if they want to improve practice value. Jordan, welcome to the pod. We're really excited to have you.
Thank you guys for having me.
Hey, everyone. Welcome back to another episode of the Extraction Podcast with your co-host, Kyle, along with the co-founder and CEO and my co-host of this podcast, Colin Ambler. And today we are joined by Jordan Blackman from Tower Leadership. Jordan works with dental entrepreneurs on the intersection of growth, leadership, and wealth creation, helping owners make smarter decisions about how they scale and how they build value inside the business. So in this episode, we're going to talk about what really drives enterprise value, the operational gaps that quietly erode it, and how owners can think more strategically about growth and wealth. Jordan, welcome to the podcast. How are you?
Thank you guys for having me. I'm great. I'm excited to be on here.
Yeah, we're excited to have you. So let's talk about specifically the erosion. I think if you were to analyze the questions that I ask and the things that I'm trying to uncover when we do these episodes is, what are the 1 to 2 things that owners should be focusing on? What are the 1 to 2 things that most owners are getting wrong? And so most owners, I think, are thinking a lot about revenue, but from your perspective, what actually separates a growing practice from one that is building real enterprise value?
Gosh, this answer could be way more than just a couple things. I'll tell you some of the ones that are most prevalent that I'm seeing lately. So a couple things. I think number one, especially in the dental space, a lot of people try and kind of overcomplicate how to grow a profitable business. And what I mean by that is they always want to look at these fancy tools. This piece of equipment is all of a sudden going to just explode my business, even though my business is struggling with the fundamentals. Or if I bring in this service, then all of a sudden my business is just going to explode. What we've found, and there's nuances to this, but what we found is the most profitable and fastest growing businesses we work with just got really good at the fundamentals. The business is focused on process. They understand their KPIs. They understand their numbers. They understand the business like the back of their hand. And I think, actually, this is one of the reasons that Team Care has been such an amazing tool for us, is I think a lot of people, when it comes to business growth, they always want more locations, more doctors, more operatories, more all of these things. And that's why, not that that's a bad thing, it's a great thing if you already have the fundamentals in check, right? And so what you see sometimes is these practices that have 5, 10, 15, 20 locations. And the story they tell you is, man, I remember when I was that single location doing 4 million and I was taking home $1 million a year, and I make less money now and I have a whole lot more headaches than I used to. And it's because they assumed that the fastest way to higher EBITDA or higher growth is always just adding locations. But if your business isn't running well, you're essentially just stretching across more overhead, meaning your business gets less profitable, but you have more headaches. So I think the first one would be, and it's not the fanciest or most exciting answer, but the first one would be probably just, it's the fundamentals. You have to get really, really good at the fundamentals. The second one that I see come up is probably they underestimate how much time it takes to do this stuff effectively. So I'll give you an example of, I was talking to a doctor here recently, and he was talking about kind of the stress that he was going through and things like that. He said, Jordan, I've got all this stuff, but I don't know if my team's following things. And I said, well, great. You probably are due for, some type of operations director or someone who's a little more talented in that realm. And he said, really, this early? And this gentleman was doing, I think, somewhere in the neighborhood of like $5 or $6 million. Very successful dental practice. And I just thought that conversation was so silly, because if you go to any other industry outside of dental, you don't get to $6 million without someone in operations full time, right? There's too many things that fall through the cracks. There's too much hiring to be done. There's too much accountability. There's too many things that need to be tracked, too much training that needs to be done to make sure everything runs effectively. So I say, dental is a beautiful industry because it's highly profitable, but because of that, it has a great way of masking a lot of mistakes that other industries run into a lot faster. I would say for a lot of these doctors, some of these positions aren't part-time positions. I mean, you've got an owner who's a clinician and a CEO and the marketing director and the HR person and the recruiter. Of course, your business isn't going to grow and scale effectively. I think people overestimate how complex it is, and they underestimate how much time it takes to actually get there. And usually requires a really good hire or some talent piece is what we found.
Yeah,
Got
I
it.
love that.
And yeah, I want to take a moment here. Jordan Blackman from Tower Leadership, which Colin referred to as the Rolls Royce of dental consulting. And so, a question, I don't know if I've ever actually asked a question to my co host on the podcast. Usually it's to our guest, but Colin, in your own words, why is Tower the Rolls Royce of consulting in the dental industry?
Oh, thanks so much for the first question, host to
Curious.
host. Yeah. Yeah, this is like a softball for me. I mean, I think that everything that Jordan said is actually tied into my answer. I think that a lot of the coaches and consultants that I've worked with kind of confuse growth and profitability. A lot of people will kind of make the production, the or collection, the yardstick to which all is measured. If I'm growing your production, if I'm growing your hygiene, if I'm growing your collection, then I must be doing a good job. And I think I started to hear about Tower Leadership maybe 2-ish plus years ago. And it was like, hey, these guys don't worry about that top line number. It's more about how much you take home and how much you really profit. And so I think everything that Jordan just said about the fundamentals and grow, 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 but I have more headaches. It's like the phrase of like, you can't scale chaos. But I think a lot of people do. And I think that one of the things that really like, and I'm sure a lot of people have a little bit of like a bittersweet emotion about is that Tower Leadership is not shy about determining and advertising who they serve and who they don't serve. More importantly, the practices that are a fit and just turning away business from the people that aren't a fit. And I think that that operations manager role is one of the things that is maybe a divider or like a decision point for your intake is like, are you willing to hire an operations manager?
Yeah.
And people say no, then that's a quick turn away from you guys doing business. But if it's a yes, it means you're willing to play ball and that you're willing to take the business seriously and treat it as a business and like maybe relinquish some of like the doctor man wearing all those hats. And so I'd actually maybe that's maybe a kind of a wrap up question, but I think in short, it's like you guys are really focusing on what matters and getting real dollars into people's bottom line pocket and treating it seriously. I know, Jordan, your focus is on high net worth clients. And so I want you to talk about that a little bit, but I also want you to maybe unpack what that operations role means. Like when you guys are recommending to someone, hire this person, maybe it's an $80,000 role, maybe it's a hundred, whatever, maybe it's got incentives into it. But what is that role? I'm sure this is a shock for a lot of people. Hey, you got to hire this role, and then you got to find that person. Like, what does that role do, and how do you get people to cross that bridge?
Okay. Where do you want me to start? The ideal client or the operations role person?
Just go, just
All
go.
right. So, well, I'll tell you kind of where the niche we found, right? And I think you summed it up great. Is there's a lot of clients that we do want to work with, and there's a lot of clients that we don't want to work with. It's not that we think they're bad people or they're not bad practices. It's just there's already a dozen consulting companies who work with them, right? And the niche we found is I think there's a lot of consulting companies who focus on the smaller practices in the industry right now. The practice is doing 800,000 to a million or 1.5. And there's a lot of value in that. This is how you greet a patient. This is your new patient gift. And there's a lot of practices that really need that information. And then there's the Accentures, the Deloittes, these super large consulting firms who, unless you're doing 100, $200 million in revenue, they're not going to give you the light of day. And I think what we found is there's a gap between, hey, I'm adding my first associate, I'm building out an executive team, I need to know how to scale, find and retain associates, locations effectively on. There's a huge gap between that 1.5 to $100 million mark. And no one's telling a lot of these business owners how to really scale a business effectively so that it's fun. So I say we're willing to work with good people. We have clients that are as small as $1 million, and we have clients that are as large as $250, $300 million with a lot of locations. As long as
Wow.
they're good people and they're willing to implement, we will work with everyone. So that's what I would say is our ideal client. But the other thing that I would say is people who are willing to do the work. I think we say this all the time at Tower Leadership. We're not in the business of just taking your money. If you're not going to do the work, it's not fun for us. It's not fun for you. Like, no one on our team is celebrating that relationship if you're not doing the work and not getting results. So people who are good people, willing to do the work, and they're just in that stage, because you'll hit that wall, whether it's your first associate, whether it's your second location, whether it is you don't know how to build out an executive team, and you'll spend probably the next 5, 10 years of your career, and you'll probably overcome it. There's a lot of people that do, or you can work with someone like us and we can tell you exactly what that playbook looks like to get over that hurdle. So that's what I would say is kind of our ideal client who we like to work with and how we approach the problems. In terms of that operations role, so I'll give you kind of a broader answer because we could go into like job descriptions and stuff, and I don't know if anyone's looking to hear that. But I'll tell you a story as kind of how I explain this to people. Is I was working with a doctor who he just started with us. I want to say this was a couple months ago, and he was talking about how he was really just struggling in his business, right? I think he was at about $5 million. Last year, he also did $5 million, and he just couldn't figure out how to break through that ceiling. He has 3 locations. Amazing, amazing person. And I said, well, let me talk to your director of operations. And I spoke to them and I said, well, tell me how you would say the last year went. And she was a super lovely person, by the way. And she said, gosh, I feel like it was so productive. I lost the doctor. I added a doctor. Our accounts receivable slipped, and then I had to fix our accounts receivable. Our marketing was struggling, so we switched marketing companies. I lost a hygienist. I rehired a hygienist. And then she woke up 12 months later, and I said, well, if you look at that laundry list of stuff that got accomplished, all of that stuff was extremely, extremely busy. But if we actually look at, hey, this is a $5 million business and their goal is $7 million, when they lost the doctor, she hired another. She lost 2 hygienists. She hired another. She was putting all of her effort and emphasis on just getting back to baseline. So what I say is, typically speaking, when you get to a certain revenue, and for some people, if they're a partnership, it might be 4 million. For some people, it might be 3 million. But your operations run into this hurdle of your office manager or whoever it is that's doing all of that is getting so inundated with things that just get them back to baseline, that if you actually look at, hey, our goal is 7 million, we're doing 5, whose full-time job is to go after that gap? Is to look at the inefficiencies in our call conversion and our broken appointment rate and our perio percentage, our fluoride percentage, our case acceptance, to not just see if we have the right marketing company, but hey, are we due to increase our budget, to change our language? I mean, there's so many different conversations here, but your business gets to a size where there's so many fires that need to put out, and you'll see the owners and the office manager spend all of their time just in survival, that there's no one actively focused on revenue. And that's when you start to see these practices just hit this plateau. It's not that they're not working hard. They're working extremely hard, but they're super busy. They're not very productive, if that makes sense. So the way I position this is someone who is not patient facing at all. Their full-time job is to look at the practice from a helicopter view, almost as the puppet master, to say, where are the holes and the gaps in this organization? Where's my margin falling through the cracks? And how do I go after it? How do I support the team, train the team, hold the team accountable? And of course, we could go down this operations director train a bunch, but that's the best way I explained it, is your business just gets to a point to where putting out the fires is a full-time job, and then really focusing on the business is also a full-time job.
So I have a kind of secondary follow-up question to that. And I think I see that in all dental practices, and I think that maybe the problem or the issue that you cited there of I gained one, I lost one, I gained one, I lost one, that is such a pattern, and it can follow with staff, and it can also follow with patients. People get sloppy with their retention, and if you want to have growth, you have to have retention. It's like we can't do this hamster on a wheel of into, out to, into, out to. So in the practice, how do you kind of help people get across that? Because if you have this person that's looking at numbers and trying to kind of find the gains, the wins in perio and case acceptance and stuff like that. If there's still this turnover flywheel that's happening, how do offices get past that? It's like if you can still have this office manager that's putting out the fires, but if they don't solve that problem of that like kind of cyclical turnover with patients and or staff, the operations manager's role is kind of just like, hey, we can't, they might be blocked or they might be stuck until the next hire can come. It's like, I think that once you hire, you can grow. But if I'm stuck with the same staff and we're still losing two and waiting to gain two back, that can be like sort of an issue for growth. And so what do you see that goes on in that world?
So, of course, this isn't a part of your question, but the first thing we would see is why do we deal with so much turnover, right? Which could be, a number of things. Maybe they don't have a compelling career opportunity there, or maybe there's a culture issue. So, of course, we would diagnose that first. The second thing is, our hiring philosophy is always be hiring. I think what tends to happen is people hire when they need someone, and then they're choosing from 5 candidates versus 100 candidates. And it doesn't matter how good you think those 5 candidates are. If you interviewed 100, you'd probably have more opportunity. And what a world it would be if you lost a hygienist and you had 5 people waiting to get in the front door because you never turned off that faucet. So that's the other thing we typically teach and what that looks like. But I'm going to go back to that exact same doctor, right? And so this doctor, my advice actually, ironically, wasn't to hire someone over that operations director. My advice to that doctor who was stuck at that 5 million was, why are you doing all of the hiring for these assistants and hygienists and front? Like, you're the director of operations and you have an office manager in each one of these locations. Ideally speaking, because I think what she told me, and she was an amazing person, but she said, Jordan, once I feel like we got back up on our feet and I get all these hires taken care of, well, then I'm really going to build out the scorecards and focus on this exponential stuff. And I said, last year, how many people did you lose? Oh, probably 6 or 7. How about the year before that? Probably 6 or 7. Okay. So what's the likelihood you're probably going to lose 6 or 7 people next year, right? So if you're waiting for this to vanish, it's always going to be an issue. Now, the next question was, if you've had to hire 2 locations or 2 hygienists in each one of those locations, you consistently use the same job description. You consistently use the same platforms to post it in. You consistently use the same interview questions, both on the screening and then in the in-person interview. And you consistently use the same pay structure. That's a process that's in your head. You just haven't rolled it out to your office managers. That needs to be put on paper, and there's no reason your office managers can't do that job. And then, yes, if the hygienist wants more than your pay range is structured in your process, can they go through approval? Yes. But what I would say is always be hiring. And number 2, I think there's a lot of delegation that can be done, because I agree. The biggest mistake that happens in this position, if it's not defined well, is we just hire someone to juggle more things, right? It's not a defined position. When that happens, which happens quite often, is people come in and have already established that position, but they're doing, office manager job duties or even receptionist job duties, but they're a highly compensated director of operations because they didn't effectively leverage their team or delegate well. So that's what I would say is between effective delegation, defining the right job duties, and just having a good strategy around hiring, when to hire, because we already know these people are coming in, so we're not doing it in a panic. The solution typically wavers somewhere in there.
Makes a lot of sense. And are you, I don't want to make assumptions, but is Tower Leadership, which by the way, listeners, towerleadership.com, if you love all the things that Jordan is saying, you can check them out. And I see on your website, you can book a consultation call. So I believe you are accepted new clients. Is that correct, Jordan?
Yes, we are.
Okay, great. I have a question about your founder, Eric. Really impressive guy. I think when I think of consultants, I think of really great coaches, sport coaches. Because a lot of what you're talking about, and we hear this, not to dilute the message that you're saying, but really it comes down to fundamentals. Hey, you want to go and play in the NBA? Get really good at free throws. Like no one gives a shit if you can dribble behind your back. Like, you're not Chris Paul, but like your best chance of getting there is to take 1,000 shots every day. And it's like, analogize that to dentistry, and we hear that time and time again. I'm curious, great coaches were once assistant coaches to great coaches. And you talked a little bit about your story of how you ended up at Tower Leadership and how Eric was a mentor to you and saw a lot in you. Who influenced Eric? I'm curious.
Yeah. So Eric was in business consulting for a while, and he married a dentist, and he started a dental practice. He did everything from, I mean, we've all seen the de novo world, right? He did everything from answering the phones to all this, scaled it to a multi doctor, very, very successful large practice. And then all of her friends were asking, like, hey, what is he doing? How does he do that? And of course, to Eric, who had never been in dentistry, right? If patients are booking, this is back in when it was taboo to open Fridays and taboo to market. So when patients were booking out too far, he's like, yeah, so let's open Fridays and Saturdays. And then why, like, let's add another location. And then why would we not hire a financial controller for a, $10 million organization? Like, he was just applying basic business knowledge and consulting to a dental practice. And at the time that was kind of unheard of. And he got to a point to where his wife said, I'm good. I work 1 day a week. I make an insane income. I don't really want to add more locations. And of course, Eric's personality is like, let's go, let's do it, let's do it. And that's when he went and started a consulting company so that he could kind of help more practices do something similar.
Wow. I don't know how much you know about the beginnings of team care and noble dentistry, but I hear a lot of Colin and Eric too. It's great.
Yeah.
So many people who have had a great impact on the business of dentistry are coming at it from an outside point of view, which can be really impactful.
Yeah, I think you nailed it to the coach side. We have a bunch of different services, but I would say, one of the core things we do is quote advisory, but I mean, it's business coaching. And I would say the value of a consultant or a coach, as long as they're the right one, is also to filter information, right? I think you can go to a million different seminars and you can get a plethora of information, and maybe none of it applies to you and maybe all of it applies to you, right? So I'll give you an example of something that happened recently, because I would say this is what makes us different, and I would say this is what makes us quote the Rolls Royce of consulting and the dental space. Is there is nothing that we do that's cookie cutter. The start of our process is we sit down with clients, and the first question we ask is, hey, what are we looking to accomplish? Why are we doing this? Do we have an impact goal? Are we looking, for a certain net worth? Are we looking for a passive income goal? That could include selling the business. It could include keeping the business. It's what are we looking to do personally? Because we typically sit down with them and their spouse is what do we want to accomplish personally long term? And then how do we use the business as a tool to get there? And when I say we're not cookie cutter, I'm thinking of a conversation I just had with a gentleman. He sat down, it was his first meeting with me, super hyped up, excited guy. And he said, man, I want to take over the world. I have one location and I want to expand. I just went to this symposium and I heard that, de novo is the best way to grow an organization. And I said, well, I mean, it's a good way to grow an organization. I said, but let's kind of do a little diagnosis. How confident are you that you can bring in new patients consistently through marketing? And he said, well, about 90 of my patients come from referrals right now from other patients. So, I'd have to find a marketing company. And I said, okay, well, how confident are you that you can find and retain an associate long term? And he said, well, my current associate's my best bud from dental school. So I've got him, but I'd have to, get a job post. And I said, well, how good are you at managing cash? Well, as long as I have 150,000 in my bank, I'm good. Well, for this person, de novo would be a disaster. You have to be really good at managing cash, really good at getting consistent new patients, and you have to find a doctor and retain them. In this person's case, he went to a seminar, and that seminar probably had amazing information. It just didn't apply to him, and he could have made the biggest mistake in his career by doing a de novo because he's walking into territory he's never had to go through. Versus my recommendation for him was, hey, I don't know if de novo makes sense for you. We might be better off acquiring a practice at a premium, doing some type of earnout so that the doctor stays there. You have cash flows day one, rather than jumping into three things you've never done consistently before. Maybe the third location, once we have a hang of that, we can do it. But I would say what makes us different is our advice could literally change from one meeting to the next, because it depends on what do you want to accomplish. And it also depends on what resources do you have and what do you do well, because every business model is entirely different.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a great little anecdote there. As we wrap up, Jordan, I wanted to, in true form, ask you a question, kind of a classic Kyle question, but a practical takeaway. What is the number one move aside from calling tower leadership immediately a dentist could make or should make this quarter if they want to improve their practice's value? What's the number one thing they can do?
In the long run, in the short run, this is going to cost you more money. So your EBITDA might take a hit. In the long run, hire people smarter than you. I say that all the time. I think it's not even dental. I think in small business, we have this unhealthy addiction to hiring potential. We hired the office manager who can be the director of operations, or the front desk person who can do some marketing. And the problem is we don't have the systems and the training and all of that stuff built out in order to grow that person. I would say the most valuable businesses we work with, if you talk to the business, the person who owns them, they're very sharp, but they're not the expert at finance, and they're not the expert at marketing or operations, and in fact, they'd have to work a 25-year career in each one of those areas to be the expert. So what I would say is the people that grow the fastest and become the most valuable are charismatic. They know how to find people, they take care of people, and they just hire people that are a lot smarter than them.
I love that. Um, that's great. That's why Colin hired me. So I totally agree with him.
That's why Eric
Yeah.
hired me.
No,
Yeah,
it's
exactly.
classic. It's like
Exactly. Uh,
if you're the smartest person in the room, then you're the dumb one.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Amen.
I mean,
Amen.
even at Tower, some of the best moves we've made, and it's always scary because it's more payroll than you expect, but a difference of 2 or 3,000 a month in payroll, trust me, the right person, you are not going to feel that payroll at all.
Yeah.
So yeah, our biggest jumps even in our organization was we brought someone in to build out a department who could run circles around us.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
I have one question. I think we're definitely at time, but this is maybe a question related to somewhat Team Cool. We've started a relationship, and we have our analytics that's getting out of your clients and distributed to you on a dashboard, and there's all sorts of ways that you can look at that stuff. I tend to think that the advisor role in the analytics and the know your numbers world is a bit understated. I think that in a classic dentist example, a dentist might look at numbers once a month, once a week, that type of situation where it's not their first language,
Yeah.
them going in and digging into percentages and ratios and bar charts and things like that. To some extent, that's something that's more valuable for you as advisors that sit in front of a computer all day and are looking at those metrics. And then when the meeting time comes up and the doc inevitably comes in and says, "Hey, Jordan, how am I doing? What are my numbers?" I think that's like a common thing. And I think, some people have tried to fight that over the years and say, no, 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 you have to look at your numbers more and more. I think there's a little bit of a maybe different approach where you can just embrace that and say, listen, my job is to know the numbers for you. And
Yeah.
I'll translate these numbers. What's your take on that? How much do you guys kind of want docs to know the numbers themselves, or at what level do you want them to know the numbers, or at what point do you guys take that ownership yourself and say, hey, it's our job to really know this analysis a lot more than you? I'm curious.
I would say both, because without any advice I give is just an educated guess. Now I have a lot of history in it, so usually I'm right, but I can look at the numbers and make really good decisions. So I would say number one, the numbers are extremely important. I think most doctors, what they're trained to look at are lagging indicators, right? Your collections, your production, your number of new patients. And the truth is, you can go to your front desk team and say, "Hey guys, we never hit our collections goal. Next month, let's really go and try and hit the collections goal." But what does that mean? Like, what led to that collections could have been a lag of accounts receivable or payment day of service the previous month. Your new patients might be low because you're booking them out too far, or your call conversion, or your broken appointment rate. And so I would say the value of an advisor, kind of the first part of your question, is we can look at data and we can read between the lines and tell you what the real issue is. Because I think what happens oftentimes is a doctor will see a number and they'll say, "Hey, Jordan, look, this really hurts." But that could just be a symptom of what's really going on in your hygiene department or what's really going on at your front desk. Yeah, your collections are down, but we could focus on collections and go after it. That's not going to fix the root problem. So I would say that's the merit of having an advisor who's an expert in this. And then for the business owner, I actually don't need them to be the experts in numbers, right? Because I've seen a lot of practices who have this plethora of data and they get obsessed with it. I want them to have it, but it's like a whole list of KPIs that they can't interpret, nor do they know how to use. And I always say, if everything's important, nothing's important. I
Mhm.
tell business owners, you need a like a list per department of 3 to 4 KPIs that give you a good snapshot of how is that hygiene department performing, and the doctor department and the front desk and the phones. And if that snapshot doesn't look like it needs to look, that's where an advisor comes in and can say, okay, let's figure out what's really going on here. But I don't think they need to be the data analyst. That's why they have data
Yeah,
analysts and
I
consultants.
agree.
But I do need them to have a pulse on their business.
Yep, 100%.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Jordan, for joining us today. This was great. And listeners, make sure to check out towerleadership.com.
Thank you guys so much for having me.
Thank you for listening to The Extraction with Colin Ambler and Kyle Bergman. Read episode notes and transcripts at teamcaredental.com.